Okay, so I went to Big Sky DevCon this year. This is my second time going. It's in Bozeman, Montana. I had a great time. This is going to be my lightning recap of all the talks. This is just my super quick take. I'm going to include all the links on every talk in the video. So if you want to see more, or you think I'm just recapping it wrong, please watch the full talk. They explain their stuff better than I ever could. Some of them were HTMX, some of them were hypermedia, some of them were AI, some of them were mobile stuff, and a lot of it was just the future of the web. The overarching thing that brings all these talks together, that made this a cohesive conference, is just building cool things and sharing them with the world. Let's meet our hosts.
Hi. Hey, welcome to the show. We're going to be your MCs. Well, we actually get the fortunate pleasure to introduce the man of the hour, Carson Gross.
That's Aaron Francis and the Primeagen. If you don't know who these guys are, look them up. I'll link to Aaron's talk on publishing your work. It's just a classic, an all-time classic. And the Primeagen, if you don't know the Primeagen, check out the Primeagen. I'll also link his appearance on the Lex Friedman podcast. These people are both, well-known, well-respected, and just kind of genuine, really kind, inspirational people. Carson Gross was our first talk. Carson Gross did a talk on API design. So let me introduce him here.
I guess first things first, I know James doesn't like, calling it HTMX Con, but let's be honest. This is HTMX. No, it's not. It's all good. I'm actually not going to talk about HTMX, so I'm sorry if that's what you wanted. So I'm going to talk about three main ideas, three big ideas.
Not talking about HTMX3 API design. There's this idea of the sort of idealist, and he uses Plato and Aristotle as sort of the philosophical underpinnings of this. But there's this battle between the two wolves in your design, or philosophers in your mind. So one is Plato, who's the sort of idealist, versus Aristotle, who's the realist. And in the implementation, he says that you should try to stick with Aristotle, right? He's the realist. This battle in this thing. The implementation has to be messy. In the actual API, like what you present, so that's behind the scenes, but what you present to the user, the actual API, that can be where you use your sort of Platonic ideals, and that's where Plato comes in.
So developing a library is often hard at any level, and you have to learn a lot, and you have to be, you have to be in it. You have to know what's going on. You have to know the details. And so what makes someone a good implementer of a particular library can make them a bad or a poor.
Okay, so that was kind of the API mindset, where you have to keep the implementor kind of out of it, because you know all the implementation details, but your goal is to not teach them all the implementation details. Your goal is to hide that from the people who are consuming the API. Okay, and the third part here, the layering. Layering is he frames it as an escape hatch. Explain it.
That's how I think you should design APIs if you're an object-oriented person, say the sentence that the user wants to do and just rearrange the nouns and verbs, and you're doing API-driven design. Perfect. So there is a problem with this API, as awesome as it is, and that is that with this API, you're reading the entire file into memory. And that's usually okay, right? And 80% of the time, who cares? You just want to read the file in and maybe parse it or whatever. It doesn't really matter that much. But when you're doing API design, I think you do actually want to have more than one way to do things. And I think the justification for that comes from this concept of layering your APIs. And this is an escape hatch. This is something that allows users, when the basic introduction, bare bones, easiest way to do things doesn't work anymore, then you give them additional ways to work with your API.
Okay. So I love this concept. It matches the way that I approach these tools. And it's you want to do the basic things in an easy way, but you don't want to feel limited. So as an API designer, that's the goal that he's talking about, having these layers of more powerful, lower level access for people who needs it, but keeping it simple. Okay, so talk 2. This is Stephanie Gredell. Her talk is going from humans to bots. So this was based on her work she did at LinkedIn. Let Aaron introduce her.
You might know her as Coder Girl 007 if you've ever hung out in a Prime stream or anywhere on the internet. She has 20 years of experience, the last 11 at LinkedIn.
So this talk is called From Humans to Bots. It is essentially encapsulating a project I did a couple of years ago at LinkedIn where we started utilizing LLMs in customer support.
Okay, so this is basically just a fascinating deep dive on how the process of linking together support. So, customer support when you go to the chatbot, when you go and you put in a ticket, linking that all together in a large system like LinkedIn. You have all these different tools that are being brought in there. You now have LLMs. She came in and basically built this system that would tie all of their different stuff together using this chat broker. And so you can see here that chat broker that she built and how it links in with all these other things.
After LLMs came out, it was like an overnight switch. It's like, hey, there's this thing called ChatGPT. And our product manager was like, okay, we got to use this. We got to be the first in line. And so we switched plans overnight. Over here, you see that Microsoft Bot Framework interacts with this thing called an LLM broker. And that is to help us direct to which LLM we want to use, as well as which prompts we want to deliver. And all of this kind of works together.
So during this is all I could think of. LinkedIn's entire support chain. And here's Stephanie Gredell, one person building this whole structure that powers their entire, and this is a big company. It's just let me remember this kind of ruthless efficiency of one or two focused devs with deep knowledge. This is a great talk for anyone curious how these big companies and hardcore developers approach these topics and implement something big. Okay. Next talk here is Chris Power, VaaS, Vim as a Service, how to teach Vim to thousands of people using Rails and Go.
And an arch aficionado / Vim enthusiast by evening. You may have heard of him from his internet moniker, Typecraft. Yeah? He actually has a really cool name, Chris Power, which is kind of insulting that he'd even need an internet moniker. It's like his tutorials on Vim and Arch were so good that even DHH used it and then released a whole bunch of really cool stuff.
Okay, so we are going to talk about something that's, a personal pet project of mine that I just had fun working on, and I just wanted to share it because I think it's a really interesting project, and I had a lot of fun doing it. I call this Vim as a Service, and it sounds a little bit weird, but you'll know what I mean when I get into it. I thought it was a cool thing to do. I thought I could help people learn Vim. Everyone gets the same Vim instance. There's no configuration weirdness. And there's, even if you're using Windows or you don't understand WSL, you can just hop into this web browser and use Vim. And I thought it was a good idea. Now, my first few iterations weren't great ideas.
This talk to me is all about iteration. So this is like the heart of this. The product that Chris starts with is nothing like the one he ends up with. It has different tech, different assumptions, different design, and a completely different purpose. But he's stuck with this core idea because he followed that passion, he followed that interest, and he goes through the whole process, the iteration, the challenges, the excitement of just building something cool for no other purpose than for the fun, and also eventually to teach people to learn this. Also, there's a little HTMX shout out here.
We use HTMX. No, I'm just kidding. This is Rails.
Okay.
We use Turbo. Turbo is actually really great, and it shares a lot of similarities with HTMX. It's fantastic. It's all about sending HTML over the wire through WebSockets. It's awesome.
Yeah, so Hotwire and Turbo are sort of the standard hypermedia HTML equivalents in the Rails world. He's building entire Vim inside the browser so that people can have this sandbox, try stuff out, and this is the example.
But that's actual Vim instance. So when someone is done, you can submit this, and then you get a score back. This is going to be 0.
So it's
because I actually didn't do
all the
the challenge. I didn't actually
that he's making
do what I was
along
expecting.
the way.
But what we get back, you can see we send the keystrokes, we send the output. If the output matches the expected output, we actually have AI score it.
Okay, so then he has AI score it, which I just thought was an interesting, everyone's incorporating AI into their stuff in different ways. Scores are not necessarily entirely objective. Like there's some subjective part in there, which actually AI is pretty good about. AI is probabilistic and non-deterministic. So getting a score based on style, based on how many keystrokes, based on this input, that's, I think, actually a pretty good use of AI. It allows you to score, thousands and thousands of things in a way that a teacher just wouldn't have the time for. And I think AI would actually do a pretty good job of that. Okay, all right, the next talk on here, talk 4. This is a big one. This is Robbie Wagner talking about how HTML is stealing our jobs. And I say a big one because this is sort of a very hypermedia, future of the web focused talk. And kind of a mind-blowing talk.
And you've probably heard of him if you've ever touched Ember or listened to Whiskey Web and whatnot, which, by the way, will have a live recording here today at lunch. All right, so I'm here today to tell you about a problem that we have as developers. We're cooked. An acronym is stealing our jobs. Not AI. It's HTML. Gone are the days of hundreds of lines of JavaScript needed for form validation or needing a huge library like Bootstrap just to build basic components for your website. So we're going to be keeping a tally of all of the JavaScript libraries that HTML has made obsolete. The carnage is really quite astounding. You'll be surprised how big this number gets.
Okay, so Robbie has found, I think, a really interesting way to talk about how many features HTML has added in the last, 10 years. And that is looking at the NPM packages that do things that now are built into HTML. So, the examples, the first one he gives here is accordions. 2,797
packages.
Color pickers.
From NPM, type color. Nothing else really to do. It just works across browsers.
All these things, and there's way more out there that you list. Form validation, progress bars, date pickers, the carousel, transitions, animations. These are all things that have NPM packages right now built in JavaScript, that developers have made over the years because it wasn't supported. So these are things that are just in there now and anyone can use. I'm not going to give them all away. Definitely check out this talk. Check out how many NPM packages get replaced. But really, you got to watch this. It kind of blew my mind. Here's a little bit on CSS also.
But CSS is also coming for us. It's not just HTML. The carnage continues.
So it just keeps getting better and better, and just fascinating to see how that's happening. And the way he does it, I think you get up into the hundreds of thousands of NPM packages that are getting replaced. Okay, so next talk here is Warren buffering, and browsers are for read, native apps are for writes. And before I start this, I think it's worth saying that some of the stuff that happened here, I don't think that it accurately reflects the values of the people of Montana or even the attendees at Big Sky DevCon. Some of these people are good people.
But I would really like it if you guys could give a very big, warm welcome to one of my best friends, Warren Buffering.
Thanks for setting the bar so. It's okay that I was introduced by the less handsome Aaron Francis, by the way. Thank you. So what I'm bringing to you guys today is a highly technical dissertation that I submitted to the Department of Aeronautical Engineering.
This is just obviously shameful behavior, but in their defense, this crowd has a complicated relationship with Warren. His talk itself, it's a really interesting take on the same starting place that a lot of people, I think, in the hypermedia world are coming from, and basically that the web is getting too complicated.
Okay, so the web is getting really complicated. We have hydration, which every developer who's had a real job knows what hydration is, but for those who don't, hydration is a process of attaching client-side JavaScript behavior to server-rendered HTML.
Okay, so instead of doing what we're doing, he's talking about moving everything to the client. So putting the database onto your phone so that there's no latency, there's nothing else. So this is making it completely self-contained, getting rid of that full network complexity so that the speed is immediate, and bringing back ways to develop like physical media back so that not everything just has to be in the cloud. So here's talking about native apps.
We need to build out a distributed system. First thing people always ask about backups and redundancy. Well, similar to the save button for the CD games, we can just export a CSV. That is a valid means of persisting application state. We can also write to an external disk. That one's a little bit nicer because we're consistently writing. We're backing up to a removable storage that we can jump between devices. SD cards are going to come back. It will be the last thing I do on this earth.
Okay, so again, shame on this crowd, but I understand there was apparently somebody from New Jersey trying to pass out old tomatoes before the talk, and Carson put a stop to that, so I think that was actually really big of him. Things could have gotten really ugly. But the point of the talk is well received, that there is this whole world of basically you can just move things completely to your client, forget about all the complexity that happens with the network. Okay, all right, so the next talk is Jon-Michael Hartway, who's talking about building things for Twitter clout.
Important metric at all, and I know you're thinking, oh, probably user satisfaction, probably KPIs. Wrong, completely wrong. Building for Twitter clout, he's already here. Please give it up for Jon-Michael.
So last year, John presented a project that they were calling Flappy Bird HTMX, which was HTMX built with Flappy Bird, literally 10 frames per second over AJAX requests, which is kind of, insane to do. And that was the whole point. So this year, what has he done? He has one-upped it and made a 3D game with CSS and HTMX. Live, multiplayer, 3D game. But that's actually not what his talk's about.
So why should we build things for Twitter clout? I mean, clout, right? A project shipped, which if you guys have side projects, you know that a lot of them aren't getting shipped out. So, the new skill. So what makes a good Twitter clout project? I've come up with a couple things. It has to be viral. It needs to be ridiculous and over the top. You should use the wrong technology. That's really important. Low scope, because you don't want to be working on it forever.
Okay, so I love all of this advice. It's really counterintuitive. This is not a side hustle. This is not a product you're trying to sell. But if you can master those things he's talking about, if you can master building viral things, like reining in the scope, something shareable, something weird, something that sparks people's imaginations. You can have fun, first of all, while you're doing it. Getting internet clout, getting people to see your stuff, that can lead to, as Aaron Francis has said in the past, leads to its own kind of luck when you publish your work like this. And also just, if it's fun, it makes it more possible that you're going to finish the stuff. And you try tech that you've never done. So this was a great talk. They played the 3D HTMX game live, and I got to figure out how he did this with this, building a 3D engine using just sort of CSS and things like this, and then playing it live. It was awesome. Watch the video to see his game played live at Big Sky. It's wild. This is all this. He showed all this stuff that he's building here. I'll just kind of fast forward through this so you can see the work that went into this.
The reason I did this was I wanted to actually give myself a little bit of a challenge, because you get to a point where you're not struggling as much and you have to give yourself artificial roadblocks. to actually progress. So, point of this talk is keep struggling.
All right, keep struggling. I love that. Okay, next up is Ken Wheeler, who you may know from, I don't know, from the internet and from React Miami. I'll admit that I don't know his work that well, so I'll let Prime and himself introduce themselves.
I don't know if you know of Ken Wheeler, but I'll give you a little bit of like little inside baseball on him. First time I ever met him, he slapped me, and it hurt a lot. Like he leaned in. It was like palm and body, and it was terrible.
Cool. Is that a 3D printed ocarina in my pocket, or am I just happy to see you guys? It's a 3D printed ocarina. Does anyone want this?
Okay, so, Ken is from the JavaScript React world, but this talk is about building shit just because you can. So let's see what he's building and why.
That's this, right? So
he's got dead
not
plants.
only can you just do things, you can just make a managed outdoor garden. So these are the biggest pieces of shit on the fucking face of the planet. I hate these animals so much. It's unreal.
Okay, so he's building for fun a system to water his plants with outdoor, a whole outdoor setup to water his plants from his phone. There's a lot here, so I'm just going to play some of the clips of this talk.
And as you can see, this is like deep principled engineering. RoboFlow, can I see a show of hands who knows about this?
And he's dropping some
dope
knowledge about stuff here.
Here it goes. And it's me.
Experimenting with stuff to build his own shit.
All right? And then you can do crazy things. Like you could tell it, like if you make finger pistols. No? So then I started blasting. And I'll tell you what, the final version looks significantly less slick than that. So that's how a lot of the ordering takes place.
Some stuff. He had to figure out a lot of stuff to make this work.
But I have other backups for that. So we have relays. You need that to work with the higher voltage stuff. Rhenology monocrystalline panel. That's a solar panel. And I didn't know how cheap solar panels were. Like you just buy like a solar panel and a car battery. And I'm going to tell you how to actually vibe code. Because there's a lot of people who tell you, they're like, oh, I'm going to use cursor rules and fucking get out of here with this MCP bullshit. No. I'm going to tell you how to actually vibe code because I have a vested interest in actually vibe coding because I don't have any time and I'm lazy as hell and I'm chilling doing shit. So I want to know how to vibe code, right? So I'm going to tell you exactly the recipe to do this.
Okay, so I'm leaving that as a cliffhanger. If you want to find out how to actually vibe code, check out his whole video. It's got a whole bunch of little tips and techniques. In the end, that crazy son of a bitch actually did it. He watered his plants at home. From the stage in Montana. The next talk here is Duncan Lutz, Potatoes Go Brrr.
And I first knew Duncan as the top tier host of a brunch that I have ever been to.
I'll let him explain the motivation here.
I needed it to apply to your daily life, something you could take back from the conference, not another dumb talk that you watched and ignored and then went to the bar after. And after about a month of thinking about what I wanted to talk about, I came upon what I thought was an appropriate topic. Potato guns. Chamber. The barrel, basically, it just holds a potato. There's not a whole lot going on.
Okay, so, he goes through a lot of the major design decisions that are involved in building a computer-controlled potato gun. So here's an example of one of them.
So we're mostly going to focus on what's going on in the ignition chamber. So let's walk through firing this design real quick. First, we're going to load a potato with a ramrod into the barrel. Then we're going to remove the end cap from the ignition chamber. We're going to spray in hairspray in a good direction, and you hit the button, which puts a shock through the chamber, and it launches the potato gun.
Okay, so this is not
chamber.
The one that he ended up going with, this design.
The reason for that is it's mostly flammable gas. I didn't really want to have my first embedded project have the opportunity to explode.
So instead, he goes the route of pneumatic air and watch the whole thing to see that how that kind of plays out. But which he mentions, the pneumatic air also has its own problems because PVC pipes have different ratings for liquid and for air, as he found out. So he walks us through this journey, learned an insane amount about Rust and electronics. Here's a little clip of the end result.
I actually understand what all of it's doing now, where I wouldn't have 2 months ago, which feels very good.
And I'm going to leave it on this cliffhanger.
Yeah, so here's the real question. Did it work?
Okay, so check out the full video to see if it worked or not. The next talk is Mike Amundsen, talk 9, Making Connections and Solving Problems, Hypermedia's Legacy and Future. This is another deep discussion on how to build APIs. Carson started us off with his thoughts, and now Mike Amundsen has written a book about this. So maybe a few books, actually.
Mike is just an internationally known and well-regarded speaker and author. I went up to him earlier and I was like, Mike, I was looking to see how many books you've written, and I can't tell. And he's like, oh yeah, it's north of 20. And I was like, north of 20 books?
Yeah, 20 books. You'd think after 20 I might get it right, but apparently...
Okay, so this talk is just packed with really perfectly organized history of APIs, of hypermedia, examples, and here's an example of some of that big picture wisdom.
This is a truism. This is a thing that drives me every day. The best APIs aren't written for the people you know. They're written for the people you don't know. They're written for the people you will never meet.
So he also breaks down the specific things that make an API really great.
So I'm going to say today that I think there are 5 things that every great API or great framework or great tool or great library has.
So I thought that was really great. This also has a lot of sort of core career advice. I loved this line.
It's really challenging for many of us to think about a project that's going to last 10 years when we're working on projects where our deadline is Friday.
Right. So that's I feel like that rings true for myself. You try to think big, but you have deadlines, you have stuff you're trying to do. He's also got this really great bit about Roy Fielding.
He wrote his dissertation to help us design new systems, and he gave us one example to try. I can tell you from talking with him, he's really annoyed that we just keep using the one example.
That one example is REST, by the way, the REST protocol.
He had expected by now, 25 years later, that we'd have come up with lots of other examples.
So before I play the rest of this clip, I think there's like a philosophical aspect to a lot of these talks. That comes from the people who I think put this together. Carson and James and people at Big Sky, the types of talks that they bring in, the different personalities. There is a certain vibe that is in all of this. It's sort of the earnest mixed with a little bit of the ridiculousness, right? Like, this is intentional. For what it's worth, though, and this is just my opinion, I think a big part of that is not the sort of nihilism, nihilistic, nothing matters, who cares, people care about this kind of stuff on a personal and a professional level. The stuff that people do here matters, even if that matter and the value is just the fun and the experience along the way. I think Mike Amundsen here makes a really good point about building things and also advocating for your values in the stuff that you build.
The best way to predict the future is to create it. We have the opportunity to create our future. Now, in an interview, Alan Kay also pointed out this is also a warning, right? There are lots of people imagining what the future could be. Some of those people may not be so nice, and they may imagine a future that's not so nice for everyone. So it's important to be active, it's important to be assertive, and it's important to think creatively about what you can do to improve your future and the future of everyone around you.
Right? Pretty good. Okay. The next talk here is Barrett A Breshears, Backends. Where we're going, we don't need backends. Let's let Aaron do the intro here.
Up next, we've got Barrett A Breshears. He's a mobile developer, has been for about a decade now. And he's gonna bring a hot take, which is we don't need backends. Which, as a backend developer, I'm ready to be convinced, but I don't know. We'll see. Okay. So
Today's talk is about running LLMs on mobile devices specifically.
So this talk is going to have something in common with Warren's talk. This is, again, mobile first and maybe mobile only. So obviously these are not quite exactly the types of apps that I work on, but let me continue letting him introduce himself here.
I was in the 2001 Steven Spielberg AI, artificial intelligence movie.
You should check out that clip. It's pretty great. One of the biggest applauses of the day at Big Sky. Okay, so why would you bring an LLM to the local device? So that's what he's talking about. He's talking about bringing these LLMs to the local devices. I'll let him explain.
Number one, they have offline capabilities. That's really cool. No network required. Second is privacy. I know I don't really like the big AI companies having all the data. And
so no network and privacy. Those are very compelling reasons in my mind to use a local LLM. In this talk, I think Barrett sort of demonstrates the AI that he built for a mobile device in a really fun way. He goes through the steps of basically replacing Carson. So he finds a good local LLM, shows you how to do that, and shows you some comparisons with different use cases. Then he takes a set of Carson Gross's tweets and trains the model on that, feeds it to his local LLM, and then starts live generating in a mobile app fake Carson tweets.
So everyone's laughing, so I appreciate it, guys.
And meanwhile, Carson is actually tweeting these out in real life, live during the conference. These same fake tweets. Okay, so this is 100% going to be the future, is these little local LLMs specifically trained to run on your device. No question in my mind. You can take this to the bank. That's my prediction for the future, is a whole bunch of these everywhere, because they're only getting smaller. Machines are getting bigger. They're getting faster. They're going to be able to handle this. And the ability to take things offline, the desire to take things offline for the reasons that Barrett mentioned, this is happening. And so check out this talk. See how he does it. See how you could start kind of looking into this yourself. I think it's awesome. I think it's going to be a great way to sort of to manage LLMs and to not have this kind of reliance also on a subscription for your app where you're paying for every user you have to access these LLMs. You just put it on there, just train it in a specific way. That's huge. The next talk here is Adam Stepinski, Extending versus Scripting, Lessons from Building the Hyperview Client. Okay, so Adam is the co-author with Carson Gross of Hypermedia Systems. So his contribution was about Hyperview, which is a hypermedia approach to mobile application development. So for this, he's created his own version of XML, where you kind of describe your UI in XML, and then the mobile app translates that into the native, mobile language. So with basic HTML and attributes, it gets translated to that mobile code. That's just the background of Hyperview, but here's a setup for his talk.
Show of hands, who here does web development? Okay, a lot of people. And who uses HTMX for web development? Okay, we got some hands. So hopefully this looks familiar. You can understand what's going on here. We have a button. Someone clicks it. We're going to make a delete request to contacts, and we're going to replace the body with the response. At some point, you probably have to add some scripting. Like, for example, what if we wanted to add a confirmation dialog before making the delete request? So we have Django template tags in the JavaScript, in the HTML. I don't like it.
Okay, so scripting inline. This is kind of where he's coming from. It does not like how that works, does not like how that looks, does not like what the function is, how easy it is to read. As a web developer, it does feel very necessary sometimes for me to have some either Alpine or HyperScript or Vanilla JS just kind of in there in the HTML. But I had never really thought that there was an alternative. So it feels very necessary, to have something like that. So he is going to give us an alternative to scripting.
And I think there's a better way to do things, and that's the subject of the talk today, extending versus scripting. Scripting is a layer of code that sits on top of the hypermedia, and it runs on the client and it kind of messes with it. It'll change some elements, maybe add some attributes, create new nodes. Extending is code that sits under the hypermedia. It's part of the client, and it's exposing new capabilities that then the hypermedia can use.
Okay, so does that make sense? You're putting these kind of like modules already into the client and then just accessing them through your code. And so the way he does this is from behaviors. So I'll let this run.
A behavior in Hyperview is how we define the user interactions. And behaviors are also great for interacting with the OS. The great thing about behaviors is that you can have multiple of behaviors on the same element. So here's a button. If I press the button, I'm going to open up a new screen on the stack with kind of a display UI. But if I do a long press, I'm going to get an edit UI popping up in a modal.
Okay, so just like this whole talk is a great primer on Hyperview and how it works. Just that concept, if you see what he's doing there, where you can imagine on a phone, a press, a long press, all these different triggers, and you're just defining it in HTML, which means you can go and you can change that HTML anytime you want. So your mobile view has that really good, slick mobile feel to it, but you're controlling it completely from the server. And you just have immediate updates. You can just enjoy yourself writing HTML, and just thinking about what that could do for an actual companion app is great. And Adam goes deep into this idea of, what does it mean to actually architect like this? If you're getting rid of scripting on your site, what's the alternative? So 100% recommend that. Check it out. Okay. Next talk on here is Alex Petros and what's left for front-end engineers. So a lot of stuff is changing on the web, and what's left for them? Let's let Aaron intro Alex.
This is Alex Petros, and he's an HTMX maintainer and an aspiring HTML standards contributor. So at some point we may have a person on the inside.
Right. So our man on the inside, I love that. Alex had a great talk last year at Big Sky on how HTMX dies, the life and death of HTMX, and what happens is HTMX just gets subsumed, gets put into the HTML standard. And he's actually working on that. So he's made progress with the HTML standards committee, something called the triptych thing. This talk is about what happens if that style of development wins, the hypermedia style. I'll let him say it here.
I want to fast forward a bit and ask the question, what if hypermedia wins? And I put wins in scare quotes here because there is no winning on the web. There has never been a platform that you less needed to win. As long as your server expresses HTML and some JavaScript and some CSS, you did it. You can do whatever the heck you like. It is the most diverse computation platform that has ever existed. What's left for front-end engineers? In a world where hypermedia or HTMX thought or returning things as HTML has become the dominant way that you do things in your platform, what does that mean for front-end engineers? But what HTML APIs do that JSON doesn't is they also encode behavior. So in addition to saying, in this example, very trivial bank account example, in addition to the data saying, in the data list, my account number is 12345, my balance is $100, I also have a set of actions that I can take that would affect that data. So in this case, I can go to hyperlinks, I can go to pages that allow me to make deposits, withdrawals, or transfers. This is REST, by the way. We don't need to belabor the whole what is REST debate, but data and actions that you can take on that data. Each API response is a snapshot in time of what your state is on the server and what actions you might be allowed to take that would change that state.
So the core idea here of just passing around HTML instead of JSON, so this is an alternative to JSON, it's not just about the semantics of what's the format of the data. It's about much more. This is like the core of the hypermedia way. This is like the fundamental thing is, and I didn't come up with this. I forget who did. I'll see if I can find it. But these hypermedia systems are like an endless choose your own adventure book, right? So every page you load, every snippet you load contains within it all the controls and all the things that you are going to need to do with that. They're just built into it. That's not, if not true of the JSON. The JSON's just your data, just pure data. The HTML contains your data plus all the controls. This is the hypermedia. So it's a beautiful thing. It's very flexible. And Alex is saying here, if that does win, what happens to all the things that you are used to dealing with on the client, where you can now just send that through the HTML? So modals, expanding things, contracting things, carousels, transitions, all of these are currently built into the HTML. Now, they weren't before, and the CSS. So Alex really provides kind of this academic underpinning. Go check out the full thing. Basically, just get inspired about the future of HTML and what we're going to be, how we're going to be able to build things using HTML. I will end Alex's thing with this question that he leaves us with.
And then always ask, could this JavaScript be HTML? If I was forms and buttons, even in their current incarnation, can go a very long way. I already talked about details. Dialog element is another one. Modals are now just handled natively by the browser. And yeah, just go watch Robbie Wagner's talk from a little while ago. He broke this down. All of the JavaScript libraries you no longer need because they're in the web platform now. Also, could this JavaScript be CSS? CSS is very, very capable. And if you can express something like an animation or some kind of interactivity via CSS, you definitely should, because it's declarative and it lasts forever.
Okay, that last line, it's declarative and it lasts forever. This is a big thing for me. I love it. The next talk here is Dennis Ivey on why good developers fail interviews, right? And this is kind of like taking a step back from the actual nuts and bolts of doing web development and thinking about, your career, like the thing that pays the bills, the thing that you have to do, to make all of this work in your life. Okay, so this talk kind of encompasses it all. How do we get one of these jobs?
Speaker is Dennis Ivey, and if you're familiar with AppWrite or Traversy Media or Free Code Camp, you have probably seen something that Dennis has worked on. He is a developer advocate, an instructor, and importantly for today, he has been in the room during hiring decisions at a whole bunch of different companies.
First of all, I got a quick question for everyone. How many people have interviewed for a job that they thought that they were the perfect fit for, and you went through several rounds and you got some kind of rejection, even though you thought you were the perfect candidate? All right, a lot of people in here.
Right, so this is a good point. Like, every single person has probably had to deal with this at some point. You're trying to get a job. And what Dennis does is he goes through just a bunch of really useful tips. If it doesn't matter to you right now, it will matter to you at some point. It's more about the mindset of trying to find a job, the stuff you go through, not taking things personally, because there's a lot more complicated stuff happening behind the scenes. So don't beat yourself up. These companies have a lot of stuff going on out of your control, but there are things that are in your control as a candidate. So you want to sort of look at the things that you can control and make sure that you're not making any of the kind of like obvious mistakes that a lot of people make here. One of the things that he mentions that's very important, his number one first thing, is that it is about vibes. People are humans. People hiring you are humans. You are human. How you vibe together matters, whether you're friendly, whether you can talk to them. This kind of stuff, these sort of soft skills, maybe you think they shouldn't matter, maybe you don't want them to matter, but they do matter. Even if they like you just a little, they may keep your resume on file, they may find another fit for you, another role. So then he goes through these sort of 5 mistakes. I won't spoil them all, but here's a sample.
I've talked to some people here, and I talked to a lot of developers that have gone through this, where some of us have been out of a job for 3 months, 6 months, maybe a year. And I'll tell you right now, there's more pressure when the bills are piling up, the credit card debt is just not looking so good. Marriage issues start occurring because of financial problems. And we go into an interview with all this stress, and we need to get this job. And when we ignore something like practice right here, we lock up, the nerves kick in, this stuff becomes very obvious.
Okay, so if you're trying to get hired right now, Dennis Ivey, by the way, is a great speaker. He really did a nice job on this. So check it out. If you're trying to get hired right now, watch the whole video. If not, bookmark it And him and Aaron have a great conversation at the end. So bookmark it, come back to it when you need it. You can thank him later. Okay, our next talk, this is 14 out of 16 here. So it's Turner Houghton. I will let Aaron kick this off.
Here to talk to us about, and I got to make sure I get this right. When you take JSX, remove React, and sprinkle in HTMX, what do we get? Please welcome Turner Houghton.
Okay, so I don't really have a great context for what this talk was going to be about because I don't know JSX. I don't use React, but he's sprinkling in HTMX. So let's see what the hell he's on about.
Some of the things we don't really like about React, and I'm sure everyone who has used React can attest to the fact that when you're dealing with a bunch of use effects with use state dependencies, not very friendly to your grug brain.
All right, so grug brain mentioned. I appreciate that. I actually really enjoy watching people who are familiar with React talk about the pros and cons. People who actually use it kind of every day. In this case, there are some big cons. The complexity, the dependency chain, this sort of server-client mixing of code, it's kind of, it can be confusing. So what's the solution?
So, without further ado, let's put JSX where it belongs, on the server, not the client.
Okay, so I am gathering that JSX is some sort of extending of HTML that's used by React, but not necessarily, you don't have to use React to use JSX. So he's putting this onto the server. And he goes into his implementation, his full implementation. This is one of those deep tech dives, his tech stack. And he builds a demo app using this stack. And this is rendering JSX on the server instead of the client, and some of the pros and cons along with that. He considers it kind of the 2025 version of the LAMP plus jQuery. So, as simple as you can get, kind of server rendered stack. He's using HTMX, he's using all these other things. I will end with the slide of all the pros, including this very popular final item.
You can finally use class instead of class name in your JSX. I consider that a huge win just for sanity all around. So the time is now. Okay.
All right. So talk 15. So second to last one here. Tony Ennis, the platform and a style sheet. And this is one of the big ones for hypermedia, for the HTML. Again, we have that theme of what HTML is capable of now. A lot of people are talking about that now. And this is going to be a big one for that. It really hit home for me. I'll play his opening here.
Very next one is Tony Ennis. He is a multiple-time founder, a product builder. He is a hypermedia maximalist. And he is here to talk to us about the platform and bridging the gap from SPAs, just using the platform and a style sheet. So please welcome to the stage, Tony Ennis.
So I've been a web developer for almost 20 years now. And when I first got into web development, I kind of fell in love with the simplicity of HTML and CSS. And the fact that within a couple of hours, I was able to build kind of static websites, and I could kind of create elements on the page and make them do things. And it was kind of magical. And that has sustained my career since then. Today, I run an agency, and we build web applications, which are a little bit more complex than the work that I was doing when I first started learning. But I've kind of been obsessed with this idea or this question of, would it be kind of conceptually possible to build the kind of modern web applications that we build today with the same level of simplicity, conceptual simplicity that I was using when I first started learning to code? And so that's what this talk is going to be about. I'd like this to be kind of a revisiting every few years talk. If the Big Sky guys will have me back in a couple of years, I'd love to come back and kind of take stock and see where we are then.
Okay, so Tony makes a really good case here for simplicity and the browser. Makes it in a really powerful way in this talk. And he's running, a successful web app agency, and he does use these other tools. He's using React for some things. So this is not kind of like theoretical, ivory tower kind of stuff, mumbo jumbo. This is very kind of brass tacks. Here's what we can do right now for our clients. And he starts off by defining a new term.
First thing I'm going to do is probably piss some people off. I'm going to make a very nuanced topic much simpler, and I'm going to come up with this new term, which is a moderately dynamic web application. And lots of different ways you could define this. My particular definition is that in a moderately dynamic web app, UI updates a little. In a highly dynamic one, the UI is constantly updating. And in moderately dynamic, you kind of have isolated UI components, whereas in highly dynamic, you've got interlinked or interconnected components. So examples of highly dynamic apps would be Google Sheets, spreadsheets, creative tools. Moderately dynamic would be, honestly, I think 70 to 80% of most software that web developers work on today is kind of in this moderately dynamic category.
Okay, so 70 to 80% of the software that web devs are working on falls into that category, in his opinion. And honestly, this talk is kind of a hard one, I think, for me to summarize, because I want to sort of bring you along the path that Tony does in his talk, but, that's showing the whole thing. So what he's doing is he's showing us how to build these, he's defined them as MDAs, moderately dynamic applications, using HTMX and Alpine. But the real meat of the talk then kind of moves on to something that, the thing that makes it all possible, which is what Anthony Alaribe talked about at the last Big Sky DevCon that was really influential to me. It's what Robbie Wagner and Alex Petros have talked about earlier, even just in this recap, 10 minutes ago, and in the same day on the same topic. So HTML and the browsers are getting much better and really quickly. So all those things that used to be the realm of the front end are now the realm of pure HTML. So what's going on?
But something has happened over the last 2 to 3 years, and some other guys have alluded to this as well. I personally think there's a working group called OpenUI who've been working on a lot of these kind of ideas. And I have noticed that the amount of progress that's happened in this space in the last 2 years, for me, is like equivalent to the previous 10 or 15 years. So we now have this like new kind of phase or new set of phases for a lot of these elements, which is they're getting full styling support and advanced interactivity. So I'm going to go through a couple that have happened recently. So for comparison, we've got the simple guys at the top, which is text field checkbox button. They've been there for kind of a very long time, and they're fully stylable. This is what this table looked like in 2023. So you couldn't really do good styling support to kind of the level that you might get from, an SPA or like a really nice component library in React land. But as of earlier this year, a lot of these things have turned green. Popovers, modal selects. I know Robbie kind of spoke about some of these things earlier on, and Alex alluded to them as well. But the deeper that I dug in for this talk, the more I realized that the kind of current progress that's happening in the space is crazy.
So I could just play, like I said, I could just play this whole talk. It's that good. It's just full of meat. But here's some of what he covers. So the specific examples of elements and how to use them. So this is like how a native platform Alpine JS would work, replacing some of that front-end state with actual variables in HTML that can work. And he goes into how to do this with web components. So check out the whole talk, but I'm going to let Tony kind of finish it here with his wrapping up, which I thought just encapsulates everything.
So just to get the idea across here, this is kind of what a web app that might look like today if you were to kind of start from scratch and wanted to support a lot of these really nice UI elements. In a couple of years, I think actually I missed Robbie's talk, but I hear that he did something very similar. A couple of years, I think you might see that go down. So maybe you still need something for date pickers and for file uploads. But eventually, I think there's a reasonable future where we get to the state, which is the premise of the talk, which is just the platform and a style sheet, and you can build beautiful, interactive, slick web apps without leaving your HTML.
Okay, so just that's good. Like that's such a good, clean way to conceptualize what's happening. Just the platform, HTML, and your CSS style sheet. Of course, you can use Tailwind if you want to. But the idea there is that HTML is going to take over one by one. It's already happening. It's happening faster. This is a movement. All right, so final talk here. Dan Vail, I'm dumb, and so can you. So this talk is, again, one of those ones about building cool shit. This one is a little more software and a little less hardware. Duncan Lutz and Ken Wheeler sort of already brought us the potato gun and the remote plant watering. So Dan is now building his own programming language. He is a C++ developer who's been working on the Elder Scrolls. Maybe you've heard of that. But this video is worth watching just for how he gave Aaron absolutely no help trying to kill time during technical difficulties.
Do we have a middle name, Dan?
Probably.
All right. And it's going great.
Oh, no. Oh, there's Warren.
Warren, I don't know what exactly I did, but it was too much. I'll say that.
Okay, so this is this talk is about sort of letting yourself, Dan's talk, and we'll leave Warren out of that. This is a talk about letting yourself explore, and he calls it being dumb, right? So that's the title of the talk, I'm dumb and so can you. And it's just doing the thing, whether or not you're supposed to do it without doing all the research first, just dive into it. That's a big theme of this conference. So what's he actually building here and why?
Build anything you want for fun and profit once you're done. You're allowed to just build things for purely your own pleasure. We're going to do an example of that in a second here. You're probably not going to make money off of it. I apologize, but that's the way it goes sometimes. What are we going to use my dumb to build? Whatever you want. And we're going to try a programming language because there are only a few of them out there and we kind of need a lot more of them. JavaScript hogs a ton of memory, so let's make ours hog even more memory than that. We'll call it hoglang as a result.
Okay, so he builds this entire whole language around pigs, hogs, truffles, with a focus on what he calls developer torture, right? There's a function in there, for instance, that just takes a random amount of memory and blocks it off. Literally random, just a random counter. That's how much memory it blocks off for this particular function every time. So you just are crushing your memory in random amounts. Okay, so this is a project after my own heart. I am a big fan of having a little bit of silliness. You go deep on the tech, you learn everything. To make that an enjoyable process, like everyone here at Big Sky is talking about, find a way to make it fun. Learning should be fun. Video recaps should have some stupid stuff in it. And every talk should end the way Dan's did.
And never stop having fun and never stop learning. I love you very much.
Okay, so that's it. That's the 16 talks. Thank you for watching. This was a really inspiring conference for me, as was the last time. I think this is some of the biggest, coolest stuff happening on the web right now is in this hypermedia space. I hope you enjoyed this recap. Watch all the talks that were interesting to you. Build stuff with HTML and CSS. Follow all these people. And of course, I love you very much.